And I always recall today that flag, red and white flag, proudly flying amongst this tremendous carnage. And unfortunately, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of white crosses could be seen around the mountainside where all the dead were lying, both German and Allied.
How did you feel about that when you saw that? Was it an emotional time for you?
No, not emotional. No, it was a kind of ferocity came into my body. That I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry, but I wanted to inwardly curse all that had gone on around. Not just the fact that all these guys had died in war, but the stupidity of war. No. And it seemed to make me very, very tough. Yeah, I felt very, very tough. I wanted to hit back.
When you think back of the war now, how does it make you feel now, thinking about the whole thing as an event?
It was frankly all a waste of time, wasn't it?
Of course it was.
Complete waste of time. Waste of lives, of time, waste of money. There are no good wars. No good wars at all. If you've been right through one like I have, and many thousand more people who really knew what war was all about when they saw the sacrificial lambs, that's all most of the people were.
So once you left Monte Cassino, you were making your way towards Rome.
Up the Liri Valley.
Up the Liri Valley. What was it like when you first arrived in Rome?
In Rome, it was amongst the cheering of thousands of Italians on the roadside, all waving. Where the hell they got them from, I don't know. All waving Union Jacks.
Union Jack flags.
It's possible they were all waving swastikas when the Germans walked in. But yes, it was. We were greeted well. Hidden wine was brought out and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was quite an experience.
How many of you were there? Were you in a convoy, or was it just?
I did a convoy. No, a convoy.
How many people? How many soldiers?
Oh, Americans, thousands of them.
So you were effectively really the very first post-war
I don't know if we're the very first, but we were amongst the very early tourists, because some years later, many years later, I visited St. Peter's with my wife, and it was a case of pushing oneself through crowds of people and the noise of hundreds of people talking. It wasn't the experience I got in the first place. No, not a bit.
Okay, Sydney, let's chat a little bit more about your adventures through Italy. After you left Leghorn, you went further north.
Where in the very beginning, and I'm saying very beginning, came the idea of a two-man torpedo, where an operator sat and operated at the front, and with his help behind him.
Well, these are the ones that they used at Gibraltar, the Italians were using against...
This is the one that they were using at Alexandria, where they sank the two battleships.
Okay.
And it was a wonderful idea, and it was first thought of in 1914.
So where did you go after that, once you'd finished your little stint in Marseille?
Well, first of all, my boss said to me, find a way of getting back to Leghorn. You'll be required there. I eventually picked up a fishing boat that was going down into Italy. First calling at Genoa, and then, I presume, because he was making that turn, and then down to Leghorn, where I was met by Vago Jarry, who had two diving suits from the Gruppa Gamma, and the Gruppa Gamma breathing apparatus. Wonderful.
So this was your first experience of real...
This is my Christmas present.
Your Christmas present.
Yes.
Your very first real diving kit.
Exactly.
After all the work that you've done.
All the time.
Freezing cold conditions.
True.
In winter, in the oceans. You've now got the full Italian diving set.
Vago said, just feel the difference. He used to be at first when we went into Italy, I'd given to him a DSEA set to wear, and he hated it. He said, "They're rubbish." or basura.
Hardly surprising compared to what he'd been used to.
Yes.
He's got the best kit available in the world.
In the world, exactly.
And you're giving him one
They
of
were
these old submarine
far
escape.
superior to anything we had.
Yeah.
Although at that time, I believe the Brits were building up to try to compare their gear with the Italians, because many of the Italian stuff, after the death of these lads in Gibraltar, had been flown to England for them to copy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, Vargo was a gentleman that you originally were fighting the war against, weren't you?
Yes.
He was one of the lads in Gibraltar Harbour putting the mines on that you were taking off.
Indeed, that is so. That is so.
But you became good friends.
Very good friends.
Yeah.
And after, he worked with me in Leghorn. Most peculiar situation for him. There he was, searching underneath American transport ships that a few months before he'd been banging a mine on, and now he was looking if he could take any off.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Yes. Complete change of sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you've got a good friend who was originally your enemy from Gibraltar.
And he turned out a very, very good friend.
Do you stay in touch with him to this day?
Yes.
You do?
We're still in touch, yes.
Where does he live now?
He lives in the same town, Livorno. Leghorn, to the Italians, Livorno.
Yeah.
Yes.
And have you been to visit him since
Yes,
the war?
yes, we have.
Yeah. So it's nice to see him again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Although he's now in his 80s like I am, and I don't think he's not as fit as me. He's not too well.
Yeah.
But I hope that, things will go right for him.
Yeah.
And I've sent him my Christmas greetings, and he's done likewise. We'll never, ever fall away from each other, if you understand what I mean.
No, of course not.
No.
Okay, so now for the very first time after you've been diving in this freezing cold water, you've actually got a fantastic Italian diving suit.
Yes.
And you're back in Leghorn with your dear friend Vargo.
By the way, with this diving suit, there's pure silk one-piece underwear.
So it felt nice.
Fantastic,
to
yes,
wear.
yes.
A bit different from your shorts.
A bit warmer than my shorts as well.
What happened with this mine that you found? Is it a teller mine that you?
No, what happened was, whilst I was waiting for Commander Crab to come out of hospital and return to the Villa Banti, where there was a mine disposal team under the command of Lieutenant Commander Phillips. I volunteered to help them lift teller mines around on the jetties, which were a big danger. And some other mine was lifted up. I don't recall the type it was, and taken in our 15 underweight Canadian Dodge to a field nearby to blow it up.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, one of our gang, or one of his gang I should say, was Able Seaman King. And he jumped from the wagon and walked round to the front by the radiator and stood on a box mine, which was lying in about 18 inches of tall grass. It blew his legs off.
Yeah.
But the thing I remember most of all was crawling up to him to give him a shot of morphine from my belt. I carried morphine in my belt. Give him a shot and then watch his eyes slowly close. Watch the grimace go from his face as I injected him, and then his eyes slowly closed and he passed away.
Yeah.
It was oozing blood.
So it must have been a very difficult time for you.
I crawled out of the grass back behind the wagon and found myself, for the very first time of all the war and all I'd done, I found myself shaking uncontrollably. I think it was latent, maybe latent fear, I don't know. But
reaction of some sort, yeah.
Yes. And I was like that for some considerable time, shaking quite violently at times, until I cooled myself right down, gathered my wits to myself again. Yep. We had to be very careful when recovering his body. We had a mine detector to make sure that there was nothing round. We eventually got his body out, crawling through the grass and dragging him behind us. And we buried him that very day in a little cemetery at the back of the town of Leghorn. I think maybe one day. I don't know if his body's ever been moved or what. But I think I can find the place again.
So, Sydney, tell me about this other incident that happened whilst you were there. You just buried Able Seaman King after this unfortunate circumstance with a mine.
Oh, yes.
You discovered someone that was actually one of the original...
No,
Italian-
this one day at the Villa Bounty, just like Jerry did, there's a knock at the door and there's a very smartly dressed young naval lieutenant stood there. Very smartly dressed. And
He was Italian.
yes, and he stated that he was one of the divers that attacked Gibraltar. So immediately I was instructed to take him to Naval HQ down the coast in my jeep, escorted by an army wagon with two Marine soldiers, or sailors, it became two Marine guards. And going down the track that I've often taken, which was a near cut to the Villa Bounty, our billet, I heard a tremendous explosion behind me, and with horror noticed that the wagon had virtually disappeared, and the two Marines were killed outright. I, fortunately, had got the mine between my two wheels, where the other wagon, being wider, hit it.
So once again, you've escaped.
Once again, I've
Another
escaped.
scenario where you could have been killed.
Exactly.
And this was the truck behind that gone over the mine and
Yes.
blown up these two lads.
One, I don't know how to describe this because it's nasty. One of the men, the Marines, had been blown up in the air, a tremendous height, maybe 20 foot or so, and his body was slooped over a bungle, or I suppose you call it a bungle, of telephone wires,
Oh, really?
where it swaying like that, swung away, swaying for many minutes before it fell down behind a wall with a great thud. Gosh, that was awful. Remember stories I don't know how to recall, but this is what it's in.
Yeah.
When we arrived in Leghorn, and the partisans let us eventually go to the port, and the same evening, after diving, we looked for somewhere to stay, a new billet, and lots of empty houses. One large house in one of the plazas there. We knocked at the door. Oh, it had a red door, by the way, and a red door, and looked the ideal place for us. And someone came along and said, there is nobody in there now. So we about to depart, and a man came round the corner and said, this house is my house. And we said, well, we'd like to commandeer it. You cannot commandeer it. It was a club. It was the German officers' club. And it turns out it was a bordello. And he said, we said, okay, we just didn't grasp completely what he was saying. The commander Crab said, come on, we'll come back later. And he slammed the door in our face. And we'd not walked more than 100 or 200 yards down the road, going back to the jeep, when there was a violent explosion. And the red door came flying down the street amongst lots of debris. It seems, I believe, that we put two and two together, seems when he slammed the door, because he hadn't been in there since the German officers had left. He'd gone for a pee, pulled a chain, and the bloody house had blown up. So
booby-trapped by the Germans.
exactly,
So once again, you were lucky.
yeah.
Now, your next experience with Commander Phillips was up to Genoa, wasn't it? Where you
Oh
were
yes.
diving for these Tellermine.
Teller mine is an anti-tank mine
All right.
that looks like a big soup plate,
Uh-huh.
and it has prongs sticking up.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a teller mine. No, there's a report that a boat had been seen dropping an object, a large object over the side, just outside Portaferro, Isle of Elba. So we decided we should go down and investigate it. And whilst the depth was about 70 feet, but I dived lower than that many times, deeper than that, I should say, many times, without any results of oxygen poisoning, which one usually gets going below the first atmosphere. 14.7 pounds per square inch turns oxygen into a poison. But as I say, it never occurred to me, never happened to me before. And I'm swimming along, gently searching amongst this high grass, seagrass, when I simply blacked out. And suddenly, no warning of anything, I suddenly went into darkness, and that was it. I believe, well, I've got to believe it, I floated to the surface, where I was very close to one of the boats that we were using, and they spotted me and dragged me inboard, where I recovered after just a few minutes. So I was very, very fortunate there.
This was your very first experience of oxygen poisoning?
Yes, and I never ever got it after that, because I still dived much lower than the first atmosphere, many times.
Yeah.
But I did investigate it and found that in my breathing bag had been perforated for some time, and water got to the CO2 granules that were inside the bag. So instead of getting clean air back in, clean oxygen back into my lungs, I was getting nothing more than the poisons I'd already thrown out.
Yeah, with carbon dioxide.
My carbon dioxide, yeah.
This is the reason that you blacked out
Yes,
this time, I suppose.
that is true. Yeah.
You were lucky once again that you floated to the surface and were rescued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But during that period of returning to dive and make sure the mine wasn't there, I was swimming just above, it must have been 5 or 6 feet length of seagrass, beautiful green grass that I love floating above. And suddenly right in front of me appears a dolphin. And a few minutes later, an entire pod of dolphins, maybe about 20. And I spent considerable time with them. And they came up to me and visited nose to nose. And what wonderful creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I never ever, of all the years I dived after, never came across any more. But as quick as they appeared, they disappeared.
Yeah.
But what an experience.
I suppose they were inquisitive to see what you
Exactly.
were in the water.
Yeah.
But there were dolphins in Gibraltar.
Oh yeah, there are now. Yeah, and there were before the war. But of all the explosions that were occurring, when every night we were throwing charges in the water to discourage the Italian frogmen, I believe after the war, it was only maybe a year, and they returned. So, and they, of course, are there now as a tourist and
good tourist attraction.
attraction. Yes. Yeah.
So, Sydney, tell me, you left Elba and you returned to Leghorn.
Yes. To discover that where Commander Crabbe and I were working on the German Georgia mine when we first entered Leghorn, and I was instructed by him to hide behind the nearest shelter I could find, and that was the lighthouse at the end of the jetty. And I discovered that the lighthouse was no longer there.
What had happened to it?
It seems that the Germans had put the delayed action mine under it or inside it somewhere, and it had blown to pieces. And the locals were telling me that tremendous amounts of granite, I presume they were, blocks, had been flung partially all over the town and all over the port.
Would that long delay booby trap mine have been there when you were first?
Of course.
So
Of course.
This is another escape for you from
Yeah.
most certain death.
Yes, definitely.
The whole thing was completely demolished.
And all the buildings around it had disappeared completely, just disappeared.
Incredible. So where did you go from there?
We headed to Geneva, the big port of Geneva, where we discovered in one of the dry docks rows and rows of horned mines, German horned mines, that have been just put there, I presume, as a big booby trap, because everything was wired together. We counted 210, I'll repeat that, 210 mines in lines and lines and lines and lines. And they were all wired together, and the wires disappeared from the surface, up to the surface, and out amongst the nearby buildings. Commander Crabbe said, I've got to find the end of that. A tricky one, Knowles, as he commented, a tricky one, Knowles. Indeed, it was a tricky one. And I felt terrible. I thought that we'd come to the end of our partnership. I felt something's going to happen here. I don't know, a feeling of dread. I don't know why, but one got that occasionally. And he said, first of all, he asked me to go and at the entrance to the dock where the British redcoats were, to clear the dockyard. No one had to be anywhere in the dockyard because there was enough explosive there to destroy the whole dockyard and part of the city. He said, Knowles, I'm going to examine it, and I want you, everything I do, I'm going to write down in this leatherback book, a little notebook, leatherback, that I'll write down everything that I find. So in the chance that something happens, that I detonate it or something, at least my follower, meaning another mine disposal officer, will see how far I've got with the dismantling. And I did. I felt the moment dread. Oh, and while I was he said, don't bother, Knowles, everything will be all right. Chin up. He was this type of person. Chin up, Knowles. I said, all right, sir, my chin's up, and good luck. And just as we were preparing to depart, I heard an explosion next door. In
the
dock area,
yeah.
In the underwater. And I ran around the corner to find out 2 Italian youths with German stick mines, throwing them in the water to capture fish. So I whipped out my revolver and fired deliberately at them. Nice to say I missed them.
Yeah.
But at least they scooted, and with the red caps after them.
And they got arrested.
Yes.
I didn't realise that they could have just blown up the entire
Well,
dock area.
I then went to a dock nearby where the Roma, which was an Italian aircraft carrier, which is now deserted and floating in the dock there, a great place to hide behind, because I've been instructed to take cover.
Yeah.
So hiding behind her and lit my pipe, sat down to wait over an hour. And then I heard a voice shout. All this time I was wondering, how is he getting on? How's he getting on? Can I help? And I did shout, can I help, sir? And all I got was a comment back in Chinese, as I say, I used to speak Chinese now and again. And only when working on the mine would he make any comments in Mandarin, I believe it was. And after about an hour, I suddenly heard a voice shout, Knowles, get me some bolt cutters and a towel. And he came staggering from round this building like a scarecrow, smothered in oil and dirt and oh, God knows what. And he literally followed the wires along and cleared them each time to try and find where they got to where the detonator was. Yeah. And he said, all clear, Knowles. I've shifted the detonator. They won't go off now. And God, what a man.
Boy, how did you get on with the Italians after they'd surrendered?
Wonderful, actually. Wonderful. Because I did have the friendship to start with of Vargo Jari and his family. They were charming to me. Yeah, we found them great, and they hated the Germans by then. Although they'd previously been allies, when they capitulated, the Germans turned on them, and starved them, were brutal to them. As a matter of fact, Vargo's wife, Liliana, had been shot through the cheek. When Italy capitulated, the Germans started looting everything and tried to enter her house to loot. And when she tried to stop them, she was shot through the cheek. Fortunately, it was just a wound. And she became, yes. I think that's the reason that Vargo turned to help us in the first place.
So you've now come to the point where you've enjoyed a short break from the stress of all the jobs that you've been doing. You had a lovely time up in the north of Italy.
Yes.
Where did you go next?
We were instructed to go to Venice where it was reported that many mines have been placed by the retreating Germans in the canals. A place that they stated that they would never bomb because of its beauty and of its originality.
And its historical value.
Exactly.
Of course. Yeah.
Yes.
But they obviously changed their minds when they were on the run, as it were. And something happened with the Bridge of Sighs you were telling me about before.
Yes. Of all the mines we lifted up through the Grand Canal and in the other canals around, and under the Bridge of Sighs, by the way, were two torpedo heads. Oh, no ordinary submarine torpedo heads had been placed there and wired together and booby-trapped. I believe they were booby-trapped. And the Italian divers, there were many there, of course, all volunteered immediately to help to clear their beloved city. And we were very happy to have them. There are many, many of them. Many of these mines that had to be moved, and it'd been an impossible job for Crab and I alone to get them, to search for them, as a matter of fact. Commander Crab got hold of a gondolier who volunteered to help us. And in the gondola, Crab and I and this guy, this gondolier, drifted out of the Grand Lanes through the moored other gondolas and under the Bridge of Sighs, where it reported they'd been seen putting mines. And as I've stated previously, they were torpedo heads wired together. And I know it sounds crazy, but Commander Crab dived from a gondola to make these two safe.
Really?
Aye. So only for Commander Crab, and a little bit myself, there would be no Bridge of Sighs today.
So not only have you saved thousands of lives in your career with
I helped to save Venice.
You've helped to save Venice as well,
Yes,
and the
indeed.
history of Venice.